When you're in a vulnerable position, simply getting through each day can feel like a battle. It doesn't matter whether you're out in the world or at home, the struggle is the same. For someone like me, fragile and easily hurt, there's no such thing as a safe haven. I was the target of mockery, belittlement, and often became the emotional punching bag for those around me. I endured it, thinking that if I could survive, it would justify my existence. I waited for a miracle that felt impossible, bearing the weight of the pain and sorrow. But now, I've made up my mind to stop waiting. I'll raise my head and forge my own path, leaving the past behind. My name is Zoe, and I'm 28 years old. For nearly a decade, I've been working as a programmer, primarily from home. There's always high demand for skilled programmers, so I'm never short of tasks to keep me busy. I manage several teams and oversee operations. The person everyone once saw as weak and insignificant is now a leader. Life has a way of surprising you. Since childhood, I was mocked for being quiet and introverted. This ridicule didn't stop with my peers. It extended into my home life too. My brother, Wesley, was particularly harsh, looking down on me and ridiculing me at every opportunity. When he left for college after finishing high school, I felt a huge sense of relief. After graduating myself, I didn't pursue further education and instead withdrew into my room. It was as if my retreat from the world was the price I paid for not continuing my studies. For years, I seldom left my room, focusing on building my experience and accomplishments. My mom and Wesley always looked down on me, but my dad was different. It's hard to understand how he ended up with someone as cold as my mother. He was a kind-hearted person. In my hardest moments, I'd seek comfort by sitting with him at the small pub he ran on the ground floor of our house, crying on his shoulder. He'd always tell me, "Hang in there, Zoe, your luck will change someday." I think he was trying to convince himself as much as me. The pub wasn't doing well, often running at a loss, and Dad struggled to stand up to my mom, who worked a corporate job. The building itself cost $3,000 a month in rent. 3 years ago, when my career took off, I started paying the rent for the pub. I'll never forget the look on my dad's face when I told him I'd handle it. It was the first time I saw him smile like that, tearfully thanking me. I worked harder than ever to support my dad and his business. That period marked a major turning point in my growth as a programmer. Working became a way to repay my dad, and it truly made me happy. Dad passed away unexpectedly 6 months ago. The pain of his loss hasn't lessened at all. I can still cry whenever I think about it, but I knew I couldn't just stay stuck in my grief. After Dad died, Wesley, who had never gotten along with him, came back home. Wesley had been married for a few years by then. His wife, Hannah, is just as mean-spirited as Wesley, sharp-tongued and sly. In the house without Dad, Wesley and Hannah acted like they owned the place. "Still hiding in your room with your computer, Zoe? So creepy." "Oh, Wesley, don't be so harsh." "Poor Zoe," Hannah would say with fake sympathy. Whenever Wesley and Hannah started teasing me, Mom would jump in too, joining the chorus of insults. Now retired, she spends all her time at home, doing nothing, but every time she sees me, she clicks her tongue, clearly wishing I'd leave. "I wish you had taken Zoe with you, Dad," I think to myself whenever the ridicule gets too much. The more they mock and alienate me, the more convinced I am that I need to leave this place for good. I need to live for myself now, especially after Dad's passing. I no longer have an ally in this house. Whenever Wesley sees me, he and Hannah both click their tongues in disdain. Mom does the same. They even eat separately from me, treating me like a ghost. Mom isn't my biological mother, she's my stepmother. My birth mother died in a car accident when I was very young, too young to remember her. I call my stepmom Mom, but only out of habit. Wesley is my stepbrother, so there's no blood connection between me, him, or my dad. Maybe that's why they treat me so coldly. After Dad's death, Wesley and his wife took over the pub. They'd always been interested in the food and beverage industry. Without a second thought, they closed Dad's pub and remodeled it into a cafe. Wesley helps out on weekends while working his day job, and Hannah manages the cafe. To cover the remodeling costs, Wesley used Dad's inheritance without ever discussing it with me. I typically keep to myself, but this time, I was furious. "That inheritance wasn't just for you, was it? How could you use it all without consulting me?" "Don't raise your voice, introvert," Wesley sneered. From that moment, Wesley's cruelty intensified. It was clear they wanted me out of the house, treating me like an enemy. "Get lost, leech, just looking at you makes me sick. You're like a slug," Wesley spat. Of course, my mom joined in with him. "Yes, get out, you're nothing but a burden." Disgusted by their ignorance and arrogance, I decided to leave immediately. I found a nice apartment, signed the lease, and moved my belongings out. As a gift to myself, I bought a new computer. On the last day, I confronted them. From now on, you'll have to cover the rent. I'm done paying. Wait, isn't this place owned by our parents? Wesley's stupidity knew no bounds. I didn't even feel like laughing. My mom, trying to act tough, shrugged. The rent is $3,000 a month. I hope the cafe sales can handle it. Wesley's face fell. Wait, Zoe, you've been paying $3,000 a month? Smirking, I laid it all out for them. Over the last decade, I've been working as a programmer. I even started my own company and now employ about 40 programmers, leading multiple projects. I've made more than enough to cover the rent. Now that I've moved, I'll be focusing on growing my business even more. Wesley, realizing the truth, forced a smile and clapped awkwardly. I didn't know that. Wow, Zoe, you don't have to leave. Why don't you stay with us? Mom, equally stunned, chimed in. Yeah, Wesley's right. No need to go. I didn't realize you'd done so well. Their sudden change in attitude was laughable, but it was too late. I picked up my last bag and stood. Too bad. I'm not helping you anymore. Goodbye. Despite their pleas, I left. My new life began in a spacious apartment where I work by a bright window, sipping coffee. Whenever I want a change of scenery, I head to a nearby cafe without anyone complaining. My life began to transform. I started dressing how I liked, experimenting with new hairstyles, and indulging in things that piqued my interest. My team even noticed the change, telling me I sounded brighter in meetings. Apparently, my voice used to be somber, which had worried them. My transformation seemed to uplift my colleagues too. Meanwhile, Wesley kept calling me, but I ignored him. Even Mom tried reaching out. I could have blocked them, but I didn't, just for a little revenge. When I was feeling down, I'd answer their calls. Wesley tried everything to sweet-talk me back home, and his flattery was pathetic. Mom, in her usual manipulative way, attempted to smooth things over. Let's leave the past in the past, Zoe, she cooed. I only listened to reject them in the end. Returning to that house to live with the people who tormented me? Not a chance. The tables had turned. Watching their reactions as I dismissed them gave me satisfaction. Slowly, I began to exact my revenge for all their mistreatment. From our conversations, I learned a lot. Wesley and Hannah had racked up significant debt. Wesley had a gambling problem, and most of the debt was hidden from Hannah. Apparently, he started gambling in college, and it only got worse. Hannah, on the other hand, had a shopping addiction. Wesley mentioned that she had enough clothes, shoes, and bags to open a boutique. Their reckless spending was out of control, leaving them drowning in debt. It was a pathetic situation. I also learned more about Hannah's laziness from Mom. Despite living together, Hannah barely helped with housework, leaving most of it to Mom. She only did her own laundry, never cleaned or cooked unless explicitly asked. The tension at home must have been unbearable. On top of that, the cafe wasn't doing well. It was operating at a deficit, and the funds from their bank loan ran out in 3 months. Typically, a new cafe needs 6 months to a year to stabilize. Their lack of planning meant their home life was strained too. Wesley's marriage with Hannah was falling apart, but that was none of my concern. Just support Wesley, I coldly told my mom before hanging up. She kept calling, trying to guilt-trip me into coming back. After all their insults, they now wanted to pretend it never happened? The audacity. Recently, my mom has been pulling at my emotions, reminding me she's in her 60s and dealing with aches and pains. She claimed daily chores were becoming too much for her. When I asked if she wanted me back to take over housework, she quickly denied it. No, just having you here, my close daughter, would be enough. You could just help a little here and there, she said, but I knew she was after my money. I didn't believe a word she said. What truly bothered me was when she brought up my dad. Your dad was kind, Zoe. He must be pitying me now. You're just like him. You wouldn't abandon your family, would you? But mentioning my dad only made me more resolute in leaving that toxic family behind. I was well aware of how much Dad endured due to Mom, who failed miserably at running a profitable shop. How many times had I overheard him being labeled as such? The very same Mom who once derided me was now forced to shower me with compliments. If Dad could see this, he'd definitely be laughing at her. It's clear that if he connected the dots, he'd see Mom for what she truly is. I later told Wesley that Mom had been openly criticizing Hannah at our parents' house. This sparked a clash between them. Now, Mom has taken to calling Hannah a freeloader, stuck in the middle. Wesley is definitely feeling the heat. 2 months later, the truth about Hannah's affair came to light. A man had approached her while she was alone at the cafe. With the business struggling and her relationship with her mother-in-law deteriorating, she succumbed to temptation. Unsurprisingly, Wesley was enraged when he found out. In a rational world, they would have calmly discussed their future, but instead, Wesley resorted to shock tactics and sought revenge, which led to both of them blaming each other. Their fight escalated until a glass ornament thrown by Hannah struck Mom's foot, resulting in a broken leg that took months to heal, leaving her bedridden and unable to manage household tasks. Feeling somewhat guilty, Hannah attempted to take over the housework, but her lack of experience led to inevitable mistakes. While small errors could have been overlooked, Mom seized the opportunity to criticize her, typical bullying, pointing out her inefficiency and the overly salty dishes. Hannah wanted to quit but couldn't. Her stress mounted as she grew angry with Wesley for his betrayal and herself for hurting her mother-in-law. Unable to discuss divorce due to her obligation to care for the injured mom, Hannah's mental health took a nosedive. Wesley claimed she had sunk into depression. Wesley faced serious consequences due to his affair. His attempt at revenge left him deeply resented by the other party involved. The partner became relentless, bombarding him with calls at home and work. Eventually, Wesley had to leave his job, unable to cope any longer. The fallout from the affair put him further into debt, and without a steady position, he was forced to take on part-time work, everything from warehouse logistics to cleaning and deliveries. He was willing to try any job that was available. Despite the exhausting schedule, he claimed it was better than being home. Facing Hannah and Mom's judgment was too painful. What was once a home filled with arguments and tension between the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law was now eerily silent. As no one was willing to engage with one another, Mom avoided looking at Wesley and Hannah. Hannah refused to interact with her mother-in-law, and Wesley felt uncomfortable talking to either of them. This situation left them all living together yet utterly disconnected, creating a hellish environment that I found truly unsettling. Wesley shared these stories with me during a phone call and eventually asked for financial help. I declined. Of course, giving them money would only foster their dependence, and I had no desire to be entangled in that web. Relationships that revolve around finances vanish once the money dries up, and I was determined to sever ties completely. Wesley mentioned he would call again, so I took the step to block his number. Along with Mom's, I had never saved Hannah's number and ignored calls from unknown or private numbers, so I felt secure. Eventually, the three of them, unable to afford rent, went their separate ways. Mom moved into a retirement community, and Wesley and Hannah ended their marriage. Rumor has it the building has already welcomed a new tenant. No one knows where Wesley and Hannah ended up. They're likely living a modest life somewhere, gradually paying off their debts. As for me, I continue to thrive in my independent lifestyle. My work is going well, and I have a positive rapport with my colleagues. Everything seems perfect, but perhaps a new chapter is about to unfold. A coworker introduced me to a man, and I've agreed to go on a date with him. He's a young entrepreneur with a sharp focus when discussing business, quite charming. Indeed, until now, I've dedicated myself solely to my career, avoiding the dating scene. It appears that may soon change. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time in the next video. Stay amazed.